Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Transform Your Practice, Transform Your Life. My name is Kristina Schneider and I'm a practice success coach here at the Ultimate Estate Planner. And if you haven't done so already, make sure that you are subscribed to our podcast so that you don't miss out on any episode. And as always, if you find any value from any of the podcasts that you hear, feel free to share that with your fellow estate planning attorney colleagues that could benefit from it. That's how more people are finding out about our podcast and Ultimate Estate Planner and how we're able to assist them. So I really appreciate it. Today's episode is entitled From Solo to Scalable, Building a Team that Supports Your Freedom. We are launching this episode the week of July 4th. So our theme has been independence and freedom. The goal being that we're really trying to help law firms and attorney business lawyers that are trying to build up their practice and are trying to figure out how do they scale and how do they continue to grow. And for one thing, if you are a solo practitioner that's listening, there is a cost of staying solo because it really is you, yourself, and you in the practice. You are anything from the marketer, the rainmaker that's bringing in the business, the actual attorney that's engaging the client and counseling them. You are likely the one drafting them. You're doing administrative tasks like copying and scanning and putting binders together and hole punching and things of that nature. You're answering the phones. You're the receptionist. Maybe you're even the bookkeeper and you're actually entering in financials. And at some point, you cannot do it all. And this is where we really want to shift you from thinking about being a doer, and instead of being a doer, you are a builder. You are building your business. You intentionally chose, for whatever reason, to start your own practice and hang up your own shingle. And there's a reason for that. But if you don't begin to build your practice around having a team of people with systems and processes for which they fall into, then I hate to tell you this, but you are not a business owner. You have a job, a very lucrative job because you've got a lot of tasks and you can't really fire yourself, I guess. But you at some point are going to hit a max capacity, and that is ultimately going to truly cost you. It's going to cost you in the form of growth. It likely is going to cost you in the quality of customer service that you're able to provide. It's going to set caps and limitations on what you're going to be capable of doing. Now, you might say, hey, this is a part-time gig for me, and I love what I do, and I don't need to work harder. I have some people I've talked to that have said that, and that's certainly fine. That is your lifestyle. But if you're truly trying to grow and scale a business and have a successful, thriving practice, then you need to begin to build. And so I really want to begin to move you towards that idea of building a team around you. And I want to first start off with saying, please, from this episode, don't go out and hire 5 people tomorrow. Don't. That's a dumb idea. That's my warning, because I have had people go back home from our 2-day event, our ultimate level event, and go and hire like 3 or 4 people at once. I said, where in our event did we say to do that? That's not how to build a team. We don't want you to do that. Yes, at some point you may require 2 or 3 or 4 support people underneath you, but you don't hire them overnight because you're not going to get the impact of them and what they can do for your practice truly overnight. So I want you to think about the tasks that I talked about that you have to do as the attorney. And I mentioned this in one of our recent podcasts about really evaluating where your time is going as the attorney business owner and figuring out what stuff can be delegated. So first and foremost, if you are a true solo, absolutely your first hire out the gate is essentially an administrative assistant that is going to take on as many administrative tasks off your plate as possible. Everything from answering the phones, greeting clients, copying and scanning, putting binders together, maybe checking email, some level of customer service support, things like that. Maybe you don't give them just yet legal drafting. I recognize that is somewhat of a skill set that you might want to wait and hold off on. But I say that, and there are plenty of services out there, if you haven't looked into them, that have drafting services, contract drafting services that can charge you by the hour, by the plan. If you're a wealth counsel member, there's plenty of services out there that are specific to wealth docs. and wealth counsel. So definitely take a look at some of those services because those can be the bridge. At some point, it may be more cost effective to bring it in-house, but those contract services are a fantastic bridge while you're trying to leverage your time and free yourself up. But certainly hiring that first admin to take on all of those administrative tasks, right? And eventually, what happens is you begin this process of what we call mitosis, of building your team. So you have somebody you brought in, you try to train them on as much about your practice as you possibly can, other than being the lawyer. And now what you're developing truly for yourself is someone that eventually could grow up into a role of manager. Because the next person you would hire to build your team would be somebody junior to that person, that would be under that person, would be managed and trained by that person. Because what you don't want to do is continue to hire for other roles that are separate to the roles that you just hired for this admin, and now you're stuck busy training again, right? You really want to see what you can do about really focusing, one person to really become your end all be all, knows all about your practice other than you yourself, so that they see the vision, they see what we're developing, and when they reach a max capacity, you can then decide who's the next hire and how are we going to take tasks off this person's duties list and delegate it downwards. And now that might free up your at original hire for doing maybe legal work, possibly taking on some level of bookkeeping of some kind, maybe taking on higher level tasks like marketing. Maybe at some point they even need to hire someone else to assist with marketing. But the goal being that they're starting to help you build a team that reports to them and not you. Because frankly, we don't want you involved in day-to-day management. We don't want you to be micromanaging all of your employees and having to be the bottleneck for which they get questions answered and training and mentorship. This is where attorney business owners begin to feel so much pressure because they've got teams of 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 people that they've built, and every single person reports to them, requires mentorship by them, has questions that they need answering from them, and it becomes a nightmare. Versus had you built up somebody who was extremely skilled and understood the nuances of running your practice, they become effectively your law firm administrator, your office manager, your director of operations, whoever, whatever title you want to give them. But they start at a lower admin level and are built up from within with that. That is how you begin to build the team around your system and within your system, so that you don't hire haphazardly and just throw people into the trenches and let it sink or swim that way. And that is why you will see a lot of practices with high turnover in positions, because nobody's managing them. No one's available to train them, right? Everyone's sitting there scrambling for attorney, business owner time, and it's time you don't have to give because you've got a bunch of other things going your way, right? And so this is where, we have a number of educational programs and trainings that we do that talk about building your team, your infrastructure, and also the proper onboarding and training and mentorship of those people, because it's never ending. Attorney Phil Cavish's practice is still in practice today, 40 plus years later, and he is still training 35-year, 30-year, 22-year, and 20-year associates, 16-year, I'm 20. He's still doing mentorship and training all the time, because sometimes we're tweaking our processes and systems. We're testing some new things out. We need to make sure that we're still falling in line with the system. And we're always finding ways to constantly improve. The growth and the idea of not being able to train anybody else or improve the results is a myth. There's always room for growth. There's always room for improvement. Sometimes it requires a refresher, right? And so here, to avoid some common pitfalls, I would recommend to avoid when you are thinking about scaling your practice and building a team around you is, well, I mentioned the first one. Please don't go out and hire, 5 people all at once. First of all, you probably don't have enough work or even the systems in place to properly support that. I would also recommend to not hire people amidst chaos. Oftentimes people feel pressure to hire an attorney, an experienced office manager, an experienced paralegal amidst chaos and overload of work, and then they have no time to properly onboard or train them. Think about being that paralegal coming into that office and no one's available to answer questions. No one's showing you how to do things within the system and process. People are upset with you because you're not following within the process, a process you haven't been taught how to do, right? That's a sure one-way ticket for somebody to quit their job with you and move on somewhere else. And then you're going to be frustrated because you're going to have this revolving door of people. So make sure that you have not only the work to support it, but that you also begin to build the system around it that people can fall within so that you can confidently, take time away from the practice and feel like all of the people are falling within your system so that work is being done at the standard and levels that you wish. Mentioned it before, properly onboarding people, right? Not throwing them into the trenches, not creating a sink or swim type of culture or environment. The other mistake I see people make is trying to clone themselves, right? They think I need to have somebody that works just like me. Well, I'm going to tell you now, if you are disorganized and you're all over the place, the last thing you want to do is hire another disorganized and all over the place person. So this is where you begin to look at building a complementary team around you with skill sets that work so that you guys are the strongest team possible, not a bunch of people that are clones of each other, right? Obviously, there are certain things about you, your personality that you may want to make sure that clicks with your team for sure, but you may not necessarily want to clone your skill set per se. Right. And then the last mistake that we see people make when it comes to hiring and scaling their team is just frankly keeping people on for too long. They see red flags early on. They don't follow their gut intuition. They tend to continuously accept either poor behavior or poor performance, hoping that things get better. And the thing I continuously hear in my coaching is, well, having someone there is better than not. And I'm going to here to tell you that's a myth. That is not actually true. That oftentimes the disconnects, the drama, the chaos, the inefficiencies, the mistakes, and the things that are happening because you have a bad hire in place are likely bringing your entire team down, potentially costing you high-performing team members. There's a much bigger cost to it than you think. Right? So the goal here is to eventually scale up your practice so that you can begin to scale down your amount of time and the dependency that your practice has on you, the attorney business owner, because you begin to build that team from within, you begin to scale. And eventually at some point, you get to a place where you get to decide how you're going to exit, whether you want to phase down, you want to completely retire out, you want to sell your practice, you want to bring in partners that take it over, however you wish to truly exit. You have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm even trying to build here before you begin building? Otherwise, you end up with a house with, a two-story house and you're older now and you can't climb the two-story house and it's not built the way you needed it to be built long-term, right? So call to action here is to figure out for yourself what's the next step that you're going to take to build your team. If you are a true solo, I already mentioned it before, hiring that admin to take on as much tasks as possible. If hiring an in-person admin because of logistics like your office space or even the cost of hiring, if you're like in a high wage state like California, let's say, then at this point, even having a virtual or contract worker that might be off-site and 100% remote is better than nothing, right? I have plenty of people that are utilizing virtual assistants and remote workers to provide them that type of administrative support that's out of office, right? So that's job one. If you have people, I would take a look at their duties and tasks and make sure that they are aligned to their best and highest effective use. Are they maxed out? Do you need to hire more? And if you hire more, instead of hiring adjacent to those roles, do you consider hiring underneath them and let people have now a chain of command and some other people to directly report that is not you, the attorney business owner? So that's what I have for you today on how to scale your practice and to avoid the pitfalls of being a true solo and to build that team so that it supports your freedom and your practice. Thank you again, as always, for taking the time out of your busy day to tune into today's episode. I look forward to continuing to help you unlock your practice's potential. Goodbye, everybody.